Hello everybody and welcome to a special time-spanning episode of History of the Marvel Universe. For today's video, we're looking at a complicated character, one whose non-linear life is difficult to lay out chronologically since it involves so much time travel and several divergent realities. So the actual order of events greatly depends on your point of view. For that reason, we're going to be exploring the life of Kang the Conqueror, specifically the version who is generally considered to be the Prime Kang from his own point of view. We'll also be touching on divergent counterparts when they are relevant, but this is primarily going to be about Kang Prime's personal timeline as it originally unfolded, starting with his birth and ending with the Destiny War. I will also note that for this week I will sometimes be referencing the original publication dates to denote where in the timeline we are in regards to the heroes of the Marvel Age. Because of the nature of Marvel's sliding timeline, these dates are no longer canon in modern continuity, having been moved up to within the past 20 years or so. But for the sake of simplicity, we're not going to address that further and will simply refer to the years that older stories originally took place in. But first, let's start things off by introducing the timeline from which Kang originates, Reality 6311, aka Other Earth. In this particular timeline, the Dark Ages never happened and mankind landed on the moon sometime around 900 AD. This denoted the first year in a new calendar and humanity established a thriving lunar colony. But eventually a war broke out between the colony and the Earth, which ended in the destruction of the entire moon. This, of course, had catastrophic effects on the entire planet, plunging civilization into a more primitive state. The world became like a mix of science fiction and fantasy, and what followed was 2 more centuries of fighting and war. Then one day a man appeared who would change the world, a time-traveling scientist from another reality, Earth 616. By helping rebuild the world and elevate its people, he became known as the Benefactor, but his real name was Nathaniel Richards. Settling on this Earth, Richards married a woman named Cassandra, and the two had a son together. Millennia passed, and by the 31st century, Other Earth had entered an age of peace and enlightenment. In the year 3000, a child was born. One who was apparently a direct descendant of the Benefactor, and thus was given his name, Nathaniel Richards. However, it's also been alleged that this child's lineage could actually be traced to another time traveler, Victor Von Doom. In either case, young Nathaniel grew up feeling restless and yearning for adventure. As a teenager, he designed a doll-sized stimuloid robot, but was relentlessly bullied for several years by a boy named Morgan. When he was 16, this escalated into a fight that resulted in Nathaniel being hospitalized after his throat was cut by the edge of the bully's anti-grav device. It took him a full year to recover, and his parents were nearly bankrupted by the resulting medical bills. Nonetheless, Nathaniel reached adulthood despising the overall mundanity of the 31st century. Using recordings brought to his world by his namesake, he studied the heroes of the 20th century, like the mighty Avengers, as well as the Fantastic Four, who were led by Reed Richards, another son of the previous Nathaniel Richards. He also came to respect and even admire the Latvian dictator Victor Von Doom, and apparently discovered inconclusive evidence that Doom may have been his true ancestor. One possible reason for this confusion is that the senior Richards once claimed to have fathered Kristoff Bernard, a boy who was chosen to be Dr. Doom's heir and at one point actually believed himself to be Doom. However, Kristoff's parentage is actually unconfirmed, and any connection between him and the Nathaniel Richards of Other Earth would be speculation at best. Seeking answers, in the year 3025, the future Nathaniel traveled to the long-preserved ruins of the Benefactor's citadel. Discovering a hidden chamber, he found parts belonging to his ancestor's time machine, as well as plans for how to use them. With his body aging slower than people of centuries past, Nathaniel spent years rebuilding and redesigning the machine. During this time, he was visited by alternate versions of the Fantastic Four from different timelines, and while he did not remember these encounters, I bring them up here to point out that by this point he'd already mastered his technology and weaponry enough to defeat and destroy at least one incarnation of the FF. Intending on taking advantage of the superstitions of ancient people, he completed his time ship, forging it into the shape of a sphinx-like idol. His ultimate goal was to raid different time periods for weapons and technology while operating out of a base in ancient Egypt. But upon reaching the year 2950 BC, a malfunction caused his vessel to crash into the sands. Not only was he stranded, but Nathaniel was injured and blinded in the crash. But the falling ship was seen by a man named Baal of the Crimson Sands, the leader of a nomadic people called the Sandstormers. The Sandstormers recovered the injured traveler, and Baal himself named him Rama-Tut, meaning the visitor from beyond the sun. The Sandstormers nursed him back to health over several weeks, but one night the strange visitor slipped away. Heading to the lands of the Pharaoh, he conquered the native people using robots and futuristic weapons he'd brought with him in the Sphinx. Furthermore, radiation from his time machine had affected a rare Egyptian herb, allowing him to use it to restore his eyesight. Not only did he depose the previous pharaoh, Amenhotep, but he sealed him within his own pyramid, where he survived by feeding on blood until he transformed into a vampire. Believed to be a representative or reincarnation of the sun god Amon-Ra, Rama-Tut ruled for 10 full years and even forbade the worship of any other gods. During most of his reign, there were few who could challenge him, and even Amenhotep's son, Ozymandias, served him as a general, albeit while conspiring against him. Mere weeks after leaving them, Rama-Tut returned to the Sandstormers, seeking a missing piece of technology from his ship, the Eye of Ages. When the Sandstormers refused to give up its location, they were massacred and enslaved. Some escaped, and among them were Baal himself and his gray-skinned adopted son. Sometime later, the pharaoh clashed with a sorceress known as Samira, the mistress of the Nile, who refused to worship him. Around the same time, Rama-Tut discovered a temporally charged object called a chronofact fragment. When a man known as Killpower was sent back in time to retrieve the fragment, Rama-Tut attempted to take advantage of the situation by manipulating him into attacking Samira. The pharaoh's duplicity was soon revealed, however, and along with reinforcements from the future, Killpower retrieved the chronofact and escaped. Rama-Tut, meanwhile, collected the residual chronal energy that was left behind, no doubt using it for future travels. Around the year 2945 BC, Rama-Tut sired an illegitimate son named Ramades with one of his slave women. Growing up neglected, Ramades hated his father and eventually became a time-traveling villain himself. Ozymandias, meanwhile, sought power by joining the pharaoh's family and offered his younger sister Nefri to be Rama-Tut's bride. Then one day, after years of searching, Rama-Tut's vizier Logos informed him that they had found the rest of the Sandstormers. Furthermore, among them was a powerful warrior with gray skin known as En-Saba-Nur. Of course, Rama-Tut, having knowledge of the future, knew that this particular Sandstormer was a mutant who would one day be known as Apocalypse. Wishing to make Apocalypse his heir, the pharaoh dispatched Ozymandias to retrieve him. However, the resulting battle caused a cave-in that decimated both sides, and only Ozymandias and En-Saba-Nur survived. Meanwhile, Logos conspired to save Egypt from both Rama-Tut and Ozymandias. and allied with En-Sabah-Nur, hiding him among the slaves building the pyramids. Also, when Rama-Tut forbade the worship of other gods, the moon god, Khonshu, also began conspiring to end his reign. When a team of West Coast Avengers from 1987 traveled back in time to 2940 BC, Khonshu masked their appearances to the Pharaoh's eyes so that he wouldn't recognize them. Instead, Rama-Tut believed them to be servants of the moon god and, after paralyzing them with his ultra-diode ray, deposited their bodies in Khonshu's temple. Complicating matters further, the Fantastic Four arrived in that same year, coming from 1963, to investigate how the Pharaoh had supposedly cured his own blindness. Not only that, but Doctor Strange had also traveled there from 1982 for completely unrelated reasons. Now, if this all seems like a massive coincidence, it's fairly likely that all of these events were manipulated by Khonshu to result in Rama-Tut's defeat. After their arrival, the Fantastic Four were enslaved by the Pharaoh using his ultra-diode ray. Rama-Tut decided to spurn Nefri and instead make Susan Storm, the Invisible Girl, his bride. Meanwhile, En-Sabah-Nur was discovered when his powers fully manifested, inspiring other slaves to riot and rise up. Rama-Tut presented the mutant with an ultimatum: become his heir and inherit his rule, or defy him and die. But En-Sabah-Nur refused to kowtow and ultimately escaped. As for the Fantastic Four, Doctor Strange was able to covertly liberate Ben Grimm, the Thing, by changing him back into human form. Before transforming again into the Thing, Grimm succeeded in freeing Susan from Rama-Tut's control. She in turn restored her brother, the Human Torch, who forced the Pharaoh to flee. Elsewhere at the same time, the West Coast Avengers had recovered and were battling the Pharaoh's forces. Not only that, but they'd already allied themselves with the priests of Khonshu and destroyed Rama-Tut's robots and weapons. With his reign at an end, the time-traveling Pharaoh used a small ship he'd charged with chronal energy to escape into the time stream. When the remnants of his machines within the Sphinx exploded, the FF assumed that he had booby-trapped his own equipment. In truth, it was Apocalypse who had destroyed the last of Rama-Tut's technology. Between this and Nathaniel himself wiping away knowledge of his existence as he left, the reign of Rama-Tut went largely unremembered by history. But while navigating the time stream, the Pharaoh encountered a temporal storm that diverted him to Earth 616 around the year 1964. There he found his alleged ancestor, Dr. Doom, stranded in the vacuum of space after his own previous encounter with the Fantastic Four. Taking him on board his vessel, Rama-Tut intentionally gave Doom misinformation, causing him to suspect that they may actually be the same person from different times. After depositing Doom back on Earth, he attempted to jump forward again but was briefly stranded. He captured the mutant mechanic Blacksmith, himself from the year 3800 of Earth 4935. However, Blacksmith was ultimately rescued by his ally, the time-traveling freedom fighter Cable. Escaping into the time stream again, Rama-Tut created a new armored identity for himself, the Scarlet Centurion. Under this guise, he traveled to 1963, where he mesmerized and manipulated the original Avengers into neutralizing the rest of Earth's superhuman population. This created a divergent timeline dubbed Reality 689, which was then primed for the Scarlet Centurion to rule. Since these Avengers were his only remaining threat in that timeline, he attempted to tie up this loose end by pitting them against the Avengers of Earth 616 from 1968. However, the Hank Pym of Earth 616 was able to use Dr. Doom's time machine to banish the Scarlet Centurion from Earth 689. Discarding this armor, he then attempted to return to his own 31st century. But a time storm caused him to overshoot his destination, and he landed in the war-torn year 4000. The science of this era was even more advanced, and so Nathaniel Richards sought to conquer it. Inspired by Doctor Doom, he created a new, technologically advanced battlesuit. Regardless of his true heritage, he chose to become an heir of Doom, and renamed himself Kang the Conqueror. And conquer he did, rallying the barbarian hordes to his cause and swiftly bringing Earth under his control. He struck outwards as well, beginning an interstellar empire, starting with the destruction of the alien Badoon. He repaired and refined his time travel technology, allowing him to go wherever and whenever he wanted. And seeking to test himself against the Avengers, he jumped to a relatively early point in their history, 1964. At first, they seemed to be no match for his advanced technology, and Kang quickly gained the upper hand. However, the tenacious heroes continued to fight, destroying his weapons and wearing him down until he was forced to flee. He returned to the far future and continued to cement his dynasty. He eventually controlled everything within 100 light years of Earth, and even alien empires bowed to Kang. He continued to watch his enemies through time and thus learned of another Time Lord, Immortus, but was not yet aware of his true identity. For now, we'll simply point out that he considered himself the master of time and resided in a limbo dimension that existed apart from normal space-time. But in the 41st century, Kang's control over the galaxy was unmatched. While he found it difficult to maintain a foothold in the 20th century, other dimensions began falling before him, including the realm known as Cosmos. The insectoid natives were enslaved and forced to build weapons for Kang, including the Growing Men, robots based on Kang's stimuloid design but infused with Cosmosian pollen, allowing them to grow in size. He then hid doll-sized growing men in key locations throughout the timeline for future use. But in all of his conquests, the one land he spared was the tiny kingdom of Exemitatius, ruled by King Corellius. This was because he was enraptured by the beauty of the Princess Ravonna Renslayer. He wanted her to be his bride, but she had no interest in wedding someone of ignoble blood, no matter how powerful he was. And so Kang brought the Avengers forward in time from 1965, intending on defeating them and proving himself worthy of the princess. When both the Avengers and Ravonna refused to relent, a furious Kang overwhelmed the tiny kingdom with sheer force. He intended on taking Ravonna as well, commanding his men to prepare a royal wedding. But Baltag, the commander of his elite guard, reminded him that they always executed the leaders of conquered kingdoms to prevent future rebellions. His refusal to follow through caused unrest among his men, and Baltag led his own uprising, seizing control of Exemitatius. Ultimately, Kang sided with the Avengers to free the small kingdom from his own troops. It was this which caused Ravonna to begin seeing Kang in a new light. Baltag was defeated, but as he was being taken prisoner, he broke free and attempted to fire on Kang. However, Ravonna jumped in front of the shot, sacrificing herself to save the Conqueror. Baltag was, of course, gunned down and killed by Kang's loyalists. With Ravonna hanging on the precipice of death, Kang placed her body in suspended animation until he could find a way to revive her. For 18 months, he spent half of each day mourning her loss. Bitter and angry, he committed fully to his conquests, even defeating the Shi'ar Imperium. But on Earth, the rebellion started by Baltag continued to grow, and Kang was determined to stop it before it spread to the rest of his empire. He decided to retrieve one of his stimuloids and found that a growing man had been accidentally activated and was battling the mighty Thor in 1967. Kang jumped to that point in time and attacked Thor, unleashing his rage on the Thunder God. He then returned the growing man to doll size and attempted to escape in a hidden time ship. However, Thor used his hammer to generate a universal infinity vortex, sending Kang careening into the timeless dimension of Limbo. How long he wandered there cannot be calculated, since time has no meaning in that place, but he eventually came upon a citadel, and inside there appeared to be the corpse of Immortus, the self-proclaimed Master of Time. Exploring the fortress, Kang found countless monitors depicting different points in time and space. And on one, he beheld the point in time moments leading up to Ravona's sacrifice. But before the fatal shot was fired, Kang used Immortus's machines to transport Ravona into Limbo with him. He was reunited with his beloved, but then he saw something that made his blood run cold. His own dead body on the monitor, for without Ravona to take the shot, Baltag had hit his mark. By changing the past, he had created another divergent timeline, and with it, a divergent variant of himself, albeit a dead one. But by monitoring the time stream from Limbo, he soon found that his exploits in time had inadvertently created a multitude of these divergent Kangs. In one variant incarnation, Kang sought to solidify his power and traveled back to the year 1901. Under the name Victor Timely, he founded the city of Timely, Wisconsin in a quiet wooded area. This Kang created the Palace of Chronopolis in the same space as the town, but out of phase with time, making it undetectable. This served as a gateway to the city-state with the same name, located on the edges of the Limbo dimension. Chronopolis as a whole existed half in reality and half in Limbo as a physical crossroads in time that touched almost every era of human history. This was perhaps Kang's greatest creation and would serve as his seat of power in future temporal conquests. As Victor Timely, he also introduced basic principles of robotics and computer science to the people of the early 20th century. In 1929, he recruited a young Phineas Thomas Horton into Timely Industries. And a mere 10 years later, Horton created the world's first real android, the original Human Torch, whom the Fantastic Four member was named after. By the 1980s, Timely Industries was the foremost supplier of computers and robotics technology, with Kang running the company under the guise of Victor Timely III. Another variant, frustrated by the 20th century, turned to other time periods and decided to strike at Camelot while its champion, the Black Knight, was occupied in battle with Morgan Le Fay. He attacked the wizard Merlin and defeated his magic with advanced technology. It should be noted that this was not technically the real Merlin, but an imposter who would one day be referred to as Merlin Demonspawn. Kang took on any knight who dared to challenge him, but none could defeat him in single combat. He planned on creating another divergent timeline which he could control by conquering the world and ensuring that no superheroes would arise to stop him. However, this plan was thwarted when Uatu the Watcher sent the Thing and the Human Torch from 1965 back to stop him. Kang would later note that it was unusual for the Watcher to interfere so blatantly, and wondered if this was actually the work of Immortus. While one version of Kang was diverted to Limbo by the mighty Thor in 1967, Another successfully returned to the 41st century, where he crushed the rebel forces with the growing man he'd retrieved. It was perhaps this same variant who was then approached by the cosmic gamesman known as the Grandmaster. The Grandmaster challenged Kang to a contest of champions, offering power over life or death to the victor. And since this Kang is not the one who traveled to Limbo, in his timeline, Ravonna was still in suspended animation, hanging between life and death. Planning to use his prize to revive his beloved, he chose the Avengers as his champions, pulling them from 1969. The Grandmaster, meanwhile, created a team of his own, the Squadron Sinister. He based his selection on a group of heroes from a different reality, the Squadron Supreme, who he'd already employed in a previous game against yet another Kang variant who'd kept the armor and identity of the Scarlet Centurion. But in the contest at hand, Kang was ultimately the victor. However, instead of granting life to Ravonna, a vengeful Kang demanded death for the Avengers. But he was thwarted by the Black Knight, who was not yet officially an Avenger and was thus unaffected. Another Kang variant once plotted to create a divergent timeline where the Avengers never assembled by killing the Hulk's ancestor during World War I. Since a localized time storm made it dangerous for him to travel there himself, he instead attempted to manipulate the Hulk into causing this, sending the Green Goliath from 1971 back to 1917. This plan backfired, however, and in the end, Kang was left stranded in the storm. While his body remained there, this particular Kang survived by transferring his mind into another. This may or may not be the same Kang who remotely puppeted a spare battlesuit in a war against rival Time Lord Zarko the Tomorrow Man. Meanwhile, another Kang gathered multiple Ravonna variants from different timelines, but found himself unsatisfied and began to lose interest in his beloved. This is likely the same Kang who, in the mid-1970s, embarked on a quest to find the Celestial Madonna, a woman destined to birth the prophesized Celestial Messiah. He soon narrowed his search to 3 individuals: Wanda Maximoff, Agatha Harkness, and Mantis. During this conflict, the Avengers found aid from a most unlikely source, Rama-Tut. Seeming to already have knowledge of these events, Rama-Tut attacked Kang the Conqueror. However, the Pharaoh was unable to prevent the death of the Avenger known as the Swordsman. As the two fought, they accidentally activated the younger Kang's time sphere, plunging them both into a temporal vortex. However, that same Kang emerged in Tombstone, Arizona around 1873 in an attempt to found a base that could serve as a stepping stone in his conquest of the 20th century. He battled Western gunslingers and time-displaced Avengers, but this time defeat came when he fought with the mighty Thor. In his anger, Kang overcharged his battlesuit's force field, inadvertently destroying himself. But just before his body was completely ripped apart, he successfully transferred his memories into another. There are, of course, more instances of Kang popping up in the time stream, like when he was abducted by the Beyonder during the First Secret War, or when he was recruited into Mephisto's Legion Accursed during the Second. But now we must finally turn our attention back to the Kang who resided in Limbo and watched much of this unfold. Having seen a myriad of Kangs suffer defeat after defeat, this supposed Prime Kang elected to cleanse the multiverse of his lesser selves. He allied himself with 2 similarly minded Kangs, recruiting them to his cause. This council then brought other divergent Kangs into Limbo, where they could be executed without producing further variants. Kangs that had carved out empires of their own were replaced with robots, bringing the entire Kang dynasty under the control of one man, the Prime Kang. However, not every Kang was successful, and some met their end during failed conquests. Many of these Kangs had their armor and equipment stolen by other beings, but we'll return to them in a bit. Once every actual variant was dead, Kang Prime betrayed the Council, leaving only one other to eliminate. This was seemingly in spite of Ravona's efforts to dissuade him from this violent path, but there's more to that as well. The final Divergent Kang attempted to kill Kang Prime, only for his booby-trapped gun to explode. His quest was over, and there was at last only one true Kang. Or so it seemed. Immortus then appeared, revealing that not only did he fake his death and manipulate Kang into eliminating his variant counterparts, but Immortus himself was in truth Kang Prime's future self. Furthermore, he had recruited Ravonna to his cause, and she had been secretly guiding Kang's path. Immortus then held aloft a psyche globe containing the memories of every single Kang that had been killed, claiming that it was what made him the Master of Limbo. Hungry for power, Kang wrested the globe from Immortus's grasp, but this too was a manipulation. The collected memories flooded Kang's mind, and thus everything that every Kang had experienced coalesced into a single cohesive but sometimes contradictory history. He remembered his childhood in the 31st century as Nathaniel Richards, his reign over ancient Egypt as Rama-Tut, his attempts to manipulate the Avengers as the Scarlet Centurion. He remembered attempting to return to his own time, but landing in the war-torn 40th century. And he now knew that the time storm which caused this was actually created by Immortus, another way his future self had manipulated his own life. He remembered casting aside his previous identities and becoming Kang the Conqueror, as well as challenging the Avengers to prove his superiority. In his memories, he set schemes in motion in the 20th century as Victor Timely, and established his fortress with the sprawling city of Chronopolis. He attempted to infiltrate the Avengers with a Spider-Man robot, battled the Thing and the Human Torch while trying to conquer Camelot, and joined a mob of villains in an assault on the wedding of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Girl. There was his takeover of Corellius's kingdom, Eximitatus, after which he fought alongside the Avengers to quell Baltag's rebellion. And of course there was Ravonna's sacrifice to save his life. He remembered both being trapped by and escaping from Thor's Infinity Vortex, as well as accepting a challenge from the Grandmaster. He remembered attempts to manipulate the Hulk into causing the death of his own ancestor, as well as the technology he employed to transfer his mind into a spare body at the moment of his death. He remembered his clash with Zarko the Tomorrow Man, and perhaps most importantly, he remembered his quest for the Celestial Madonna. During this event, he battled with another version of himself who was still Rama-Tut. And while Kang Prime remembered this from the perspective of the one garbed as Kang, he did not gain the memories of that Rama-Tut. But he did remember their battle taking them into Limbo and finally learned what happened next. While Kang knocked out Rama-Tut, both variants were then summoned by Immortus. Immortus imprisoned Rama-Tut and offered to help Kang defeat the Avengers. However, Kang betrayed Immortus and held him captive as well. Using his older self's machines, Kang gathered together a legion of the unliving from different points in time. And after the legion was defeated, Kang made one last-ditch effort to capture Mantis, the true Celestial Madonna. However, Immortus thwarted him, having replaced his captive with a shape-shifting space phantom. After several more memories, including his clash with Thor in the Wild West and his involvement in the Secret Wars, Kang recalled returning to Limbo for a showdown with Immortus. But wait, hang on. Wasn't it Thor's Infinity Vortex that sent Kang to Limbo? Didn't that happen before the Celestial Madonna saga? As you can see, some memories overlapped or contradicted one another, but eventually he discerned which were truly his and which were variants. He knew that it was he who found the fake Immortus corpse in Limbo, which in turn started his quest to eliminate his divergent selves with the tools his future self had left behind. All so that Immortus could trick him into absorbing the memories of every slain counterpart, and thus Immortus himself would have them. But the whole process threatened to overwhelm Kang's mind, and so he performed a desperate final gambit to save himself from madness. Using his mind transfer technology, he intentionally created one more divergence, another Kang with which to share the mental stress. And this actually worked, as the addled Divergent Kang emerged with the last thing he remembered being his showdown with Immortus. Meanwhile, Kang Prime, or the Kang that still considered himself Kang Prime, retained the collected memories of his various counterparts and retreated to Chronopolis to recover. From there, he organized his many imposters and imitators from across the multiverse, most of whom had defeated a variant Kang and adopted his identity. This became the Council of Cross-Time Kangs, and the final Divergent Kang, created by Kang Prime, was soon recruited into their midst. To avoid confusion, each member of the council gave themselves an individual name, like Kang Cobra or Kang Kong. And so the Divergent Kang chose the name Fred, after Fred Flintstone. One Kang appeared to be a variant of the space pirate Nebula, but her true identity is something we'll discuss a little later. The Cross-Time Council overstated their importance to the Divergent Kang Fred, implying that what he'd survived was merely a local war, and that their council was a higher order. This, of course, was simply a manipulation tactic, and only the leaders of the council were aware that they reported to the true Kang Prime. Meanwhile, Kang Nebula plotted to betray the council and seize power for herself using appearance-altering and mind control technology. She was eventually discovered by the council, and Kang Fred joined a Mesozoic Kang and Chairman Kang on a mission to stop her. They followed her to something called the Time Bubble, a virtually impenetrable barrier surrounding the alternate reality 8810. Within existed an ultimate weapon, a variant of Galactus that had been altered and augmented by a renegade Celestial. But one by one, each of the Kangs were drawn into the inescapable temporal vortex. Trapped in the surface of the Time Bubble, Kang Fred phased in and out of existence. From there, he witnessed the events of the demonic invasion known as Inferno on Earth 616 in the year 1989. To prevent life on Earth from being destroyed, Kang Fred successfully activated one of his growing men, which lured several heroes to where they needed to be. And in 1990, Kang Nebula manipulated the Fantastic Four into penetrating the Time Bubble, allowing each of the trapped Kangs to escape. However, the three council members were soon defeated, with Kang Nebula manipulating the Human Torch into killing Kang Fred. Kang Prime, meanwhile, planned to use the Celestial Madonna to gain the ultimate weapon for himself. He clashed with the Fantastic Four and the Silver Surfer in 1989, but Mantis no longer possessed the power he required, and so his scheme came to naught. Perhaps he could have attempted a different method in a different time, but Kang found himself growing tired. He turned his attention towards running his vast empire, which spanned galaxies, dimensions, and timelines, conquered by various selves whose lives he remembered living. During the Infinity War in 1992, he joined Dr. Doom on a quest to gain control of the cosmic containment units, not because he needed more power, but simply because he was bored. He continued to toy with his enemies and recruited a team of warriors from across space-time called the Anachronauts. And soon after that, he discovered that he was being stalked by an assassin calling herself the Terminatrix. But when he uncovered her true identity, Kang was shocked to learn that his would-be killer was actually Ravonna Renslayer. Do you remember how one Kang had previously accepted a challenge from the Cosmic Grandmaster to restore his Ravonna's life? Well, after their game ended, the Grandmaster secretly took that Ravonna's body, replacing it with a lifeless duplicate. Resurrected by the Grandmaster, that Ravonna wanted revenge on Kang for his shallow manipulations. To this end, she infiltrated the Council of Cross-Time Kangs under the identity of Kang Nebula. When those plans failed, she took the name Terminatrix and tried to strike at Kang Prime directly. Impressed and intrigued, Kang challenged her to single combat, and Ravonna accepted. However, their fight was interrupted by the Avengers when Thor threw his hammer through the force field they were in. It seems that Kang allowed this to happen since it passed through effortlessly. And in a sacrifice mirroring past events, Kang pushed Ravonna out of the way and allowed himself to be struck. Her feelings suddenly complicated, Ravonna put Kang into stasis just as he had once done for her. Posing as Kang, Ravonna took over running his temporal empire and soon learned that his was not the only one. On the grand scale of cross-time, the Time Variance Authority had a significant amount of control, while much of the future beyond the Kang dynasty was controlled by Revelation, herself a future version of Ravonna. Meanwhile, the earliest eras of just about every timeline were controlled by a powerful temporal entity known as Alioth. With no one else capable of holding the monster at bay, Ravonna was forced to revive Kang. But not before Alioth had already wiped out the entire Council of Cross-Time Kangs. Although it seems that this too may have been part of Kang's plan to tie up loose ends. To push Alioth back to its own domain, Kang unleashed Tempest, an artificial entity created by Immortus. Tempest absorbed the temporal energies released by the deceased cross-time Kangs, and used it to grow large and powerful enough to keep Alioth locked in eternal combat at the beginning of time. With that done, Kang presented Ravonna with two options: go to the future and become Revelation, or stay with him and help rule the Kang dynasty. However, Ravonna rejected both options, stabbing Kang in the back and putting him back into stasis. Eventually, however, she revived him again, this time on her own terms, and the two decided to try working together. She adopted a new guise as Rebecca Tormenay, Victor Timely's bride in 1903. Kang was also briefly captured alongside other time travelers by a powerful being known as Akhenaten. When that crisis passed, he returned to Chronopolis, but the years began to weigh heavily on him. He had grown weary of conquest as he approached his 60th year of life, and found his mind drifting back to a time when he ruled a small land that worshipped him instead of a sprawling empire that demanded all of his attention. He decided to leave Chronopolis under Ravonna's control and retired to ancient Egypt. This time he intentionally stranded himself there, thus beginning the second reign of Rama-Tut. However, this time Rama-Tut ruled with virtue and compassion, and by the time he was 70 years old, began to feel fulfilled. He was, however, troubled both by the events of his past and by his future destiny to become Immortus. He intended to break this cycle, but he was without a working time machine, and so he placed himself in suspended animation for several thousand years with help from the wizard Shamaz. And so Rama-Tut awakened and aided the Avengers during the Celestial Madonna saga in the 1970s. He battled his past self, experiencing this same conflict from the other perspective. He hoped he could make things go differently, but destiny, it seems, is a powerful force. Rama-Tut was defeated by his own past self and imprisoned by his future self. He saw Immortus ally himself with Kang, only to be betrayed and imprisoned alongside him. But both were freed by the Avengers, and that time at least, Rama-Tut left them as an ally. Taking some of Immortus's machines, he vanished into the time stream once again. However, his failure to alter events left him feeling powerless, and he wandered the centuries realizing that everything he'd ever done was fated from the start. Relenting to destiny, he decided to make his way to Limbo and finally become Immortus. But as he did, he saw one more chrono flash depicting his future self and what he was about to do. He saw Immortus pledging his servitude to the powerful trinity known as the Time Keepers. He saw this destiny, and he denied it, turned away from it, and refused to step into Limbo, creating one more divergence. He rejected Immortus, shed Rama-Tut, and returned to Chronopolis to resume his true role as Kang the Conqueror. He observed other temporal agencies and empires, and plotted against them. He weakened Tempest, allowing Alioth to break into the domain of the Time Variance Authority. He turned Revelation against the Delubric Consortium and kept other temporal realms similarly occupied. Finally, he considered the device he'd used before to transfer his mind into other bodies and escape death. Feeling it had made him complacent, he crushed it, deciding there would be no more do-overs and no more second chances. He studied Immortus, his masters, the Time Keepers, and the one who'd created them, He Who Remains, the last director of the Time Variance Authority who lived in a citadel at the end of time. He was also briefly caught up in an incident involving the X-Men of 1998 and the crew of the USS Enterprise from an alternate 24th century. In preparation for his war against Destiny, he forged unlikely alliances with Mantis's father, Libra, and the Kree Supreme Intelligence. When Immortus endeavored to end the life of Rick Jones, a human who'd once accessed a power known as the Destiny Force, Kang violently opposed him. He even had Libra guide Rick's subconscious into activating that power again, assembling a team of Avengers from different points in time to defend him. The battle soon spilled over into Kang's own domain when Immortus launched an assault on Chronopolis. Immortus stole the power source for the city, which he then converted into the Forever Crystal. This caused the complete destruction of Chronopolis, and with it, the Anachronauts, and even Ravonna Renslayer. However, Kang survived and joined forces with Rick Jones, the Supreme Intelligence, and the Avengers against Immortus and his masters. The Time Keepers, it turns out, wanted to destroy most timelines in which humanity existed, keeping only the ones necessary to ensure their own existence. When Immortus refused to allow such a vast temporal genocide, he too was killed. With Rick Jones and the Time Keepers both calling in reinforcements, things soon erupted into all-out war, with Avengers from across space and time fighting each other in the Citadel at the end of time. The Time Keepers then attempted to forcefully warp Kang into his Immortus persona and transform him into their servant. However, Kang's will was so strong, he resisted so vehemently that he actually diverged into two separate beings. While Kang remained Kang, everything that was Immortus split off into a separate younger version of himself. The energy backlash resulting from this caused the Time Keepers to be weakened long enough for Kang to obliterate them, ending the Destiny War. In the end, Kang had lost his kingdom, but he had conquered his own destiny, and truly became the once and future Kang. Oh man, hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I know everyone always tells you to like, comment, and subscribe, but this one in particular was a significant undertaking, and I really enjoyed doing it, so I'd genuinely appreciate it if you could do all those things, and share the video if you liked it too. I also have a Patreon if you want to support more videos like this, which is linked in the description, along with other places you can find me. Oh, and of course, as always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description as well. But yeah, if you like my content and you can spare $1 per month, please consider supporting me on Patreon. It really does help a lot. It'll even get your name in these special thanks here. But either way, once again, thank you for watching, and until next time, true believers, Excelsior!